Hello everybody, welcome to the webinar this afternoon, Assessments for Progression in Building Services, Engineering Level 2. Okay then, the agenda for this afternoon is welcome and introductions, which I'll do in the next slide. And then we've got a summary of the assessments within the Progression Qualification Wales qualification for building services. On-screen assessments, and then we've got practical projects, the learning resources, and the guided discussion part of the level 2 progression. And then at the end, any questions and answers. Myself is Mark Jones. I'm the EQA manager for the North and West of the UK. We've got Graham Hyatt, who's in the presentation today, who's EAL BSE Heating and Ventilation EQA. And we've got Andrew Beresford, who's at EAL BSE Plumbing and Heating EQA. I'm also an electrical EQA as well. We'll be sort of talking you through the session today. The webinars will be recorded, so it will be available at the end of the session. At some point at the end of today, you'll get a link to the webinar, so you can digest the information, because it is quite detailed in some parts of the presentation and will need time for you to reflect. If you can keep your microphones on mute, if you need to ask a question, if you can type it in the questions bar on the right hand side of the screen, and we'll answer that at the end of each session if there's any questions showing. Or you can ask the questions verbally if you want to come off muted mic at that point in time. As I say, there'll be a link to the presentation, and there'll also be a link to the survey for this presentation. We'll put that in the chat section on the presentation today, but it'll also be in an email that'll come out with a link to the presentations as well. Okay. So the summary of the assessments for this particular qualification, there's three assessment types. There's the on-screen assessment, which covers 20% of the overall marking weighting. There's the practical project, which is externally set, internally marked, and that covers 60%. So that is the bulk of the session of the value of the weighting on the marks in the practical project. And then we've got the guided discussion, which is internally set and internally marked, and that's 20% of the marks, similar to the on-screen assessment. As I said at the bottom of the slide there, an assessment pack detailing the requirements of the assessments for this qualification can be downloaded from the Skills for Wales website. And there's the link in the bottom part of the screen there. Details of each assessment can be found in the assessment specifications within the assessment pack. So within the assessment pack for this particular qualification, there'll be Pathway A and Pathway B. Pathway A is for the plumbing and heating, and Pathway B is for the electrical. So it's important that you don't get the two confused. So the on-screen assessment consists of a range of multiple choice question types, ranges from a pass to distinction, can be taken at any stage in the assessment process, although it's recommended that this is completed prior to the practical project and the guided discussion. There'll be 50 questions and 75 minutes for that on-screen assessment. The practical project is made up of 3 tasks that require the learner to show their planning, performing and evaluation skills. So there's 3 key areas to be considered in the assessment there: planning, performing and evaluation skills, which you'll see in the practical project documentation later on. And again, a range of from pass to distinction within the grading marks. The practical project must be completed before the guided discussion. The guided discussion then contains two parts, including the learner's reflection on completion of their practical project. So obviously they've got to reflect there on what they've done in the practical projects, things they've done well, things that could have been done better, or surprising outcomes from the practical projects, some feedback that they need to note. There's 40 minutes for the guided discussion, and again that will be ranging from the pass through to distinction, and there's grading marks which you'll see in the documentation later on to come to those grades. The guided discussion can only take place once the learner has completed the practical project, so it can't be done before the practical project. The summary of the assessments for the on-screen assessment, practical project and guided discussion are detailed there. So the on-screen assessment is multiple choice questions, externally set, auto-marked. Receipts will be received by the centre on the same day. As you can see, there's an asterisk there. The first set of cohort of results will be held for moderation, which we've been asked to do by Qualification Wales, just to make sure the marking and grading is correct and adequate. The practical project is internally marked, externally verified, provisional marks awarded following an internal assessment. Oh, we go back, finger trigger happy. So the guided discussion is internally marked. Externally verified, provisional marks awarded following internal assessment and internal verification of assessment. Overall qualification results then. Provisional grades for the practical project and guided discussion to the learners within 1 week of completion is what we're committing to. Undergo internal and external quality assurance, and then final grading will be issued by EAL. Any resubmissions or resits of an assessment, when a learner fails to successfully achieve a pass grade in any of the assessments, they are permitted to resit or resubmit. When resubmitting, learners can achieve the full range of marks. On-screen assessments can be found in the Appendix 1 of the assessment pack. Practical projects. The practical project covers all content from trade-specific units. Please refer to the assessment documentation in the assessment pack. Guided discussion. The discussion covers 2 content areas as shown in the following slides. So the on-screen assessment details then. On-screen assessment provides learners with the opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding from across the core learning areas. The on-screen assessment will feature a range of engaging multiple choice questions, types and styles of multiple choice questions. They're externally set and marked and available in English and Welsh, and will contribute to 20% of the overall qualification grade. Practice and live on-screen assessments are available on demand via ealsurpass.com via the EAL hub. So there are practice questions for learners to undertake prior to taking the actual test. Invigilation of the on-screen test will require the usual compliance with EAL EAF1 documents for those that are currently centres with EAL. That's similar to the JCQ online examination guidance information. And that's available in Smarter Touch. Completion of an EFA4, which is the invigilation document, to ensure that the allocated invigilator is linked to the qualification also. C-team plans and the invigilator checklist is completed by the invigilator and stored securely for sampling by the EQA on ongoing visits. IQA sampling will be required to ensure that the invigilator is delivering the on-screen tests instructions required by the EFA1 or JCQ requirements. IQA sampling documents to be saved in the IQA file electronically or hard copy for sampling by the EQA at a later date. Again, please review the requirements in the qualification manual and the assessment documentation for further information in the assessment pack. On-screen assessment types is multiple choice. There'll be 50 questions, 75 minutes for this, and it's closed book. No notes at the side of them. Non-programmable calculators are permitted. Sample grade boundaries are provided in the assessment pack. These may vary for live assessments. Results on-screen assessments are auto-marked, and results will be received by the centre on the same day as the assessment is completed. A results release process will be followed by the consortium when the new assessment versions are released. Bearing in mind that if it's the first time the exam's been sat, the first cohort, then there'll be a delay in releasing those results just for moderation, and then of the results to make sure the marks are awarded correctly with the electronic exam. Any tests sat after that, then they'll be available on the same day of the assessment. Any questions on the practical, sorry, on the written test at the moment, online written exam? If you can type your questions in the questions section on the right-hand side. We'll move on now to the practical project then, which is the 60% of the assessment value within the qualification. So the progression documents, as you can see there's a copy of the qualification manual document, which is downloadable from Skills for Wales site. And we've got the assessment pack on the right-hand side, which details the assessments and the pathways A and B for plumbing and heating and the electrical. And there's different sections in there. Section 2 is for the learner guidance, what the learner needs to know. And section 3, 4 and 5 for the assessor guidance on the on-screen exam, the practical project and the guided discussion within those different manuals. An assessment pack detailing the requirements of the assessments can be downloaded from the Skills for Wales website, as previously mentioned. Also, what's available on the Skills for Wales website is the Qualification Wales Centre Admin Guide. And that talks you through how to apply, etc., what the requirements are for centres, information required, which gels in with the presentation that we're delivering today. So the practical project is externally set, internally marked with 60% weighting. So practice and live trade project packs are available to download from Skills for Wales. That's the website link there. So there's a practical project pack sample there. And a practical project pack A, which are downloadable. The purpose of the practical project is to assess the learner's ability in the chosen trade area, whether it's plumbing and heating or whether it's electrical, and to enable them the learners to plan out the work required for their chosen trade area, which is 14 hours, and enable them to carry out and perform an element of the work in the form of practical project skills for them chosen trades, which is 40 hours to complete the performing element, and that 40 hours shouldn't be broken. Enable them to review, evaluate their work based on key deliverables and planning. And again, that's 6 hours to complete this part of the session. So the practical projects are internally marked and externally verified. Provisional marks are awarded. Assessments are translated into grades using the marking and grading tables provided in the assessment pack. Provisional grades are then submitted to EL EQA team, who will then sample and verify the grades awarded. When you have a look at the practical projects and the assessment packs, you'll see there's pass, merit and distinction, but there's also 2 grades for pass, merit and distinction as well. So we'll talk you through that a little bit later on when we get onto the marking section. The assessor will use a practical project grading table in the assessment pack to calculate a provisional grade for the learner. Notification of this provisional grade will be given to the learner within 1 week of completion of the assessment, with guidance given on the provisional nature of the grade. Provisional results will be to both internal and external quality assurance. So they must be sampled by the internal quality assurer and the external quality assurer. If you have a look at the practical project pack, all the details are in there of what the requirements are. Additional demonstration of employability skills through the practical project. These skills below will form part of the learner assessment and will be integrated through the tasks, marking and grading criteria. Time management, effective planning, setting personal targets, problem solving, words and terminology in the qualification related assessments. So in preparation for the practical projects, learners will need some guidance on use of certain words and verbs in describing, what they're doing. As it mentions there, common verbs to be used: analyze, compare, describe, discuss, etc., which will give prompts to give an indication to the learners of the type of response that is expected by the question. These words include state, describe, explain, and discuss. So the learner must follow what the words are saying. If it's saying state something, that's what it means. If it's explain something, it means explain and expand on something. Are learners clear on the meaning of these relevant to their qualification, all assessments, so they can align their responses to the questions being asked? So again, this is part of the teaching and learning, which will give you some key points to consider in the next few slides in preparation for learners for these practical assessments. So activities for your learners: give a meaning to the typical assessment command verbs in their qualification assessments. So an overview, research, consider, calculate, etc. Impact, review, list, third-party people or companies. Review and reflect on own reflection, make connections between skills, knowledge and understanding are the key areas. So get your learners to do an activity about what they think these words mean and how they apply to their required assessment briefs. So again, it's about preparing learners for the assessments, giving them examples, practice sessions, utilizing these verbs and wording identified on the slide. Again, all this information is in the assessment packs. So it's about looking at the assessment packs, preparing sessions, training sessions to support the learners ready for when they're going to actually take the assessment. There's some key meanings associated with across the learner assessments that include an overview, a general view of summary of the learner's future career path and career progression, research and investigation or something other than resources to establish facts and reach conclusions, employment opportunity in chosen trade area, any vacancies, job search to be carried out. So consider, think carefully about something before making a decision. Example, costs of trade materials and other costs for each of the trade project. So waste of materials, again, things to be considered. Calculate, work out the answer to a problem using mathematical operations. Prime costs, expenses related to materials and labour for each of the project tasks. The process of studying, examining something, for example, the practical tasks for the project and how did this work. So these are sort of considerations the learners are going to have to undertake. To give a rationale, reasons for example, quality in trade area. Method statement, a document that details how to carry out the work safely. Describes the safety precautions to control risks identified and in a risk assessment. Third party, a person or group besides the two people involved in the situation. An impact, effects or influence on reputation and business. So as you can see through there's quite a few areas of difference to how learners need to be prepared for these practical performance tasks. Obviously moved away now from unit assessments that we currently used to into more of a holistic applying knowledge to a project and doing reports, feeding in information, doing calculations, costing, etc. General understanding and level of English to complete this, or level of Welsh in describing and portraying what their thoughts are and findings are of preparing for the project. So this is for your CPD action plan moving forward in preparation or preparing for the learners to undertake these practical activities. So centre activity with learners. So you might want to create examples for learners on use of the descriptive verbs, etc. for sections detailed below, which are the 3 key areas of the assessment, which are planning, performing and evaluation. Create example practice sessions with learners to enable them to write and answer the reports for each of the sections in the practical projects and the guided discussion. Assessors to review the marking templates and guide the learners to use the appropriate wording to aim for the highest grade. Allow practice and feedback to learners on areas to consider. So again, it's about developing examples, practice sessions for the learners to carry out after the teaching and learning of a specific trade has been delivered in preparation to undertake these assessments, the practical projects and the guided discussion. So things to consider for yourself so far, whether you're an assessor, IQA, somebody who's doing the delivery. What CPD needs have you identified for yourself in delivering the qualification and assessment requirements? Schemes of work, delivery plan, aligned to units within the qualification. When will you explain all the requirements of the qualification assessments to your learners, including the practical projects? How many times will you be doing this to reinforce their understanding? How are you designing your qualification delivering to include mock assessments for all elements of the level 2 progression qualification, including practice for the practical projects? So what practical activities are you doing? Are you not just practical activities, but part of the written statements as well, costings, etc., material waste, all the things that are in the practical projects that need to be considered, need to be built into your practical mock assessments. What is your formative assessment strategy for the practical projects? And what are you doing? When are you doing this in the academic year? So again, it's about planning this into your curriculum delivery when you're going to be doing your practice sessions, when you're going to be doing your actual practical project assessments. So as you can see there in the slide, there's things to think about for you to prepare learners, prepare yourselves, planning your timetables, schemes of work, etc. In preparation for the delivery and the assessments of this. And along with that, there'll be the IQA sampling of the qualification as well. Obviously, there'll be internal quality assurance of the online assessment, which will be checking that the invigilators carrying out the online exam correctly. There'll be invigilation documents that need checking to make sure they've been done and filed securely. In the practical project, there'll be observing the practical project across, if there's more than one assessor involved, to make sure you've got standardization across the assessments there, to make sure that nobody's being treated more favorable than others, and that they're adhering to all the quality assurance procedures and practices that you've got within your centre and for the awarding organisation. So, have you identified any risks so far for the practical project? What do you feel are the risks in terms of the delivery and the assessments of the practical projects? What challenges might you face? So I don't know if there's any questions for any of our experts on the panel at the moment, for Andrew or Graham. If you can come off mute and ask any questions or type them into the questions section.
I've been answering some questions as we've been going through, some type of questions that came in. One in particular about their passwords, just to let you know that we'll email the passwords as they're requested. Somebody asked about whether or not this session was being recorded because they missed the first 7 minutes. Yes, it has been recorded and it's available via email. We'll email the link to you for the recordings once it's all done and dusted. And that's been the question so far, Mark.
Okay. Okay, if we're happy enough to carry on then, there may be more questions as we go through the next part of the presentation. Thanks, Graham.
No problem.
Okay then, so there's a few sort of risks so far within the practical project. So preparation and planning for the practical projects, timings in the academic year, clear from the teacher and learners. Learners are aware of the time scales. So again, getting the planning done, looking at the breadth and depth of the practical assessments, of the online examinations, of the professional discussion, and getting yourself a plan within the year, and then obviously communicating that with learners so they're aware when they're going to be doing things, when they're going to need to be carrying out these parts of the assessment. So practice, use of video or audio technology, film the workmanship, and or get students for self-critique what they've seen, either individually or with peers. So it could be, some good workmanship, it could be some poor workmanship, etc., and feedback, what can be done to correct. It could be waste materials, video clips of something where there's lots of waste, how the learner can refer that back to the cost of the job. Reducing waste would reduce the cost of the job and increase profit, things like that they need to be considering. Present method statements and performance criteria to the peers, which builds learners' confidence in doing this. Managing timescales for completion of the practical projects. College self and the learner. So college itself is ensuring that the workshops are available, the assessor making sure that the assessment materials, etc., are all readily available, and that the learner are on time and are carrying out the practical project as planned. And again, being aware at the end of the year or the end of the practical project sessions, is the time planned for resits if somebody's either been off sick or has not quite met the criteria. That needs also to be planned in. Planning for internal quality assurance of assessment, what system, process and timings are in place. And again, that's the advice for internal quality assurance on these qualifications are in the Centre Admin Guide. Feedback to the learners, the outcomes of their formal and summative assessments, what constitutes good verbal and written feedback. Always must be affirmative and developmental. So feedback to learners, be truthful, but there's a way of feeding back, any areas of development, but they do need to be aware that they've got to meet the criteria within the practical project. So doing the practical projects in your college or training centre, challenges to consider. The practical project pack containing the trade-specific project briefs are available via the Skills for Wales website. Centres must download these at least 3 weeks prior to the start of the live assessment to allow a centre to confirm and source, if needed, the materials and tools required. So as part of your centre approval, if you've had centre approval so far, your EQA would have checked resources to make sure you've got test bays to a reasonable size to enable these practical projects to be carried out. And obviously the materials that you'll need to order to run these tests need to be taken off the practical project pack plans in plenty of time to run the practical project. Project briefs, in brackets there, learner sections, should only be provided at the start of the assessment period. Learners in the planning tasks when learners are ready to do the complete project. Cohort size, again, this is something to consider. How many test bays have you got? Do you split the learners 50-50, some doing teaching and learning, some doing the practical project and then change round? Or do you have, you might have a class of 15, you've got 15 test bays. I just don't know about it. It's all about your planning and the practical management of student absences as well, times for or slots for learners that have been absent on the date of the practical assessment or week, been on long-term sick through various reasons. How can you fit those in and plan those in? How is it practically managed? Assessment timings, planning through the academic year. When will you start the assessment? After Easter, summer term. Learners need precise dates for their summative assessments and the timetable. Practical projects must be supervised in the centre's workshops at all times by the centre staff, which is detailed in the assessment pack and the conditions of assessment. So they do need to be supervised, especially if they're using, blow torches, if they're doing any safe isolation, things like that, must be supervised at all times. And again, planning for marking time, so familiarisation with the grading criteria. And again, as it says there, please look at this in detail after today's presentation. Have a look at the assessments. What commitment does it need from the assessor? What have you got to mark? How long is that going to take? So again, if you've got 15 learners in a class, are you going to need other assessors involved? And again, once you start involving other assessors, have you got standardisation across the assessment? Doing the trade projects expectations. Colleges or centres must provide a fully equipped workshop for trade routes, inclusive of tools, equipment, providing suitable flexible space for learners to operate in a safe manner. A tools and material list has been provided as part of the assessment brief for each trade, plumbing, heating, electrical. And as it says there, see the practical project pack, which identifies tools that would need to be supplied. Workshops and materials must be available for all required progression training and assessments or practical activities. That could be, if it's electrical, it could be conduit benders. If it's plumbing, it could be copper pipe benders. It could be all sorts of things that not the sort of hand tools that learners may have, or that you may have on wall boards. These are sort of the heavy duty stuff. Typical materials and tools required for a chosen pathway trade to enable training and assessment. So again, if you're just offering the plumbing and heating section, you wouldn't need the electrical. If you're operating the electrical, you wouldn't need the plumbing and heating. If you're operating both, then you've got the cost of both to provide for the learners. Learners will follow their briefs for chosen trade areas showing their skills. Learners will follow the plans they have created and complete the practical tasks in the specified time frame. So there are specified time frames for these. I think it's 40 hours, we said, for the practical projects. And really, this needs to be planned and delivered. So there's potentially no break in that. So what I mean by no break, it's not about going in every Tuesday over 6 to 8 weeks. It's got to be done continuously so the learner sees the job progressing all the way through. So the evaluation of the tasks by the learner. So learners must review and evaluate outcomes of each practical task against all their preset performance criteria, detailing the work completed and how the final outcome met the initial project brief. Learners must not forget the command verbs of the task: review and evaluate. So there's a key highlighted in bold there, areas that the learner needs to be aware of and include in their evaluation. Learner answers should be based on quality rather than quantity, which we'll see in the next slide. Typed responses only. So again, they need to be legible, handwritten. Learners must conduct and evaluate own performance. In the planning and completion of each practical section, identifying areas of improvements are where the criteria within the criteria. Lessons learnt, what they did right, what went well, what didn't go so well. So evaluating their own performance. What would they do differently next time if they had to complete them again? So it's like if a contractor's on site, first time they do a job, it might take longer than they originally planned. Next time they do it, it might be a bit quicker because they've learned from the initial installation what potential things can go wrong, areas where they can speed things up, etc. And again, typed responses only in that. And they've got 6 hours to do the evaluation. So the presentation of the work, written responses are required for tasks within the planning and evaluation section of the project. Written responses must be provided as electronic typed responses. Learners must ensure that it's their own work. The work is presentable, i.e. use a standard font in a readable size, for example, Times New Roman, equivalent size 12. Use double spacing and include adequate margins. Each piece of work is clearly labelled with their name, centre number, learner number, and the reference. All electronic files must be saved in the following format: surname, first name, name of centre, assessment date, version number. So assessor guidance then for the practical project. So we've got the assessment pack and the practical project pack. Again, make sure you get these downloaded and review these. Start your planning. Assessors must know and understand the practical project marking grid from the outset to ensure that their questions allow the learner to evidence their best practice. Don't forget the marking grid should have been shared with and explained to the learners before their assessment so they understand how to get their highest marks. So again, it's about letting the learner look at how they're going to be assessed and preparing for that. So this is just an extract then from the marking and grading task planning and evaluation section, which is in the assessment pack, page 29 to 31. So this is just the detail there. It's got the learner name, assessment date, and then details of the marks awarded. So for 1 mark, they must do that minimum. For 2 marks, they must do that. And then for 3 marks, it's a comprehensive statement. So this is how the assessors will be making their judgments against these statements, making sure that they've got those key areas covered in when you're awarding those marks. Then you've got the same for the self-employment marking descriptions. Practical project assessment, examples in the project pack. So that's the project pack document sample. So this is the assessment page and how many marks are awarded. Obviously, there's a tick box within there. So each trade area has its own assessment requirements specific to the trade area. These are broken down into 7 sections. Total maximum marks achieved over the 7 sections would be 60. Each section must be passed, one minimum of 1 mark and a maximum of 3 for each section. So invest time individually or in your teams to unpack the assessment criteria for the respective trade areas. EL will be offering further support on assessment and grading moving forwards. Once we get learners registered on centres, there are, as you can see in the Qualification Wales Centre Admin Guide, it details how many centre engagements are free and then any extra ones, the costing for that, etc. That's the information there on the assessment project pack. So the overall practical project mark, this table indicates the total marks available for each section of the practical project and the minimum mark which must be gained within each section. So as you can see there, we've got task 1, task 2, task 3, and then the available marks, the overall available marks, and then the threshold pass mark. But as it mentions at the top there, you can't get 90 in planning and then 0 in trade task 1 and still arrive at 116. You must get the threshold pass mark in each section. Marks awarded within each section must be totalled and combined to create the overall project mark. The table below indicates a grade to be awarded based on the learner's overall mark. So the threshold pass mark indicates the minimum score that the learner must achieve in each section, but does not set the minimum score which must be achieved overall. So this is the table. So total marks on the left, 0 to 115 is a fail. And then, as you can see going down here, you've got P1, P2, M1, M2, and then D1, D2, D3. So this is where we've got fail, pass, merit, and distinction. But within pass, we've got 2 grades. Merit, we've got 2 grades. Distinction, we've got 3. So they're the different points awarded to those grades. So again, your marking must be accurate. And again, this will be part of the internal quality assurance checks, is that the marking has been accurate and it's been standardised across the assessors involved in the assessments of these practical projects. And obviously the document completed to show that you've checked that the assessing. So the assessor must use this table to calculate a provisional grade for the learner. Notification of this provisional grade must be given to the learner within 1 week of the completion of the assessment, with guidance given on the provisional nature of the grade. Provisional results will be subject to internal quality assurance procedures, followed by external quality assurance activity completed by EAL. Results will be submitted to EAL and the final assessment grade aggregated with other assessment methods toward an overall qualification grade, which will be issued by EAL. So I don't know if there's any questions on the practical projects section of this report, Graham. I don't know if any have come in.
No questions yet. I think they're all well speaking, and I don't think they've understood a word you said, Mark.
All right.
Now we've had a couple of questions come in, predominantly about information, logging on to the EAL hub and stuff like that. So yeah, we've answered them as we've gone along, and we'll send links out. Feel free to, even after the session's over, if you want to email us in direct with any questions, we can answer them as we go on. Okay.
Okay. Okay then, so top tips for assessors then. Assessors must use the whole assessment process when undertaking the practical projects. So obviously planning, then you carry out the assessment, feedback to the learner, and obviously record the assessments on the appropriate documentation accurately. Which is detailed in the text boxes there. So for tutors then, understand the key requirements on the practical project brief and prepare and plan delivery and assessment. Read the project brief tasks instructions for at least 3 or 4 times so you're clearly able to translate these requirements to your learners. Are there any word limits to tasks? Can learners attach appendices to the planning tasks? 1 and 3 example, employment vacancies and quality rationale. Remind learners they must pass all tasks to complete their end of year assessment. Plan for those learners who didn't turn up as scheduled. Have you factorised this eventuality into your planning and timings in the academic year? I mean, that could be multitude of reasons. It could be, you know, doctor's appointments, job interviews. It could be off ill, off sick, all sorts of things. But again, it's got to be planned and factored in. Read and understand the assessment requirements for the practical project. What qualification resources are you preparing for the delivery of the qualification as a whole? So again, what workshop facilities, what classroom facilities do you need? And any books, any online information you need to download. EAL, I've got some information, and that's on the Skills for Wales website, is all the support material. So action planning. So what do you need to do after today? So plan the teaching and learning delivery for the qualification. Develop teaching and learning resources aligned directly to the qualification and assessment. Plan formative assessment strategy. Plan a summative assessment strategy. So what you're going to be doing as practice sessions for the candidates, and then obviously the summative actual exam. Plan your dates for internal team and internal quality assurance meetings. So again, it's a new qualification. It's an high-risk qualification in the eyes of Qualification Wales because it's new. It's moved away from logbooks and unit assessments. Totally different type of assessment. There's no direct claims for minimum of 2 years, which Qualification Wales will review after that time. But what you must make sure is that because it's new, that there's more robust internal quality assurance checking, making sure things are being done correctly, standardization meetings, checking, basically. That's what I would advise as an EQA. Do as much checking as you can. Plan your marking and internal quality assurance dates for all learners' work. Provisional results must be given to learners within 1 week of completion. Key fact to remember. So internal and external verification, quality assurance. Understand the EAL external verification quality assurance process and all related timescales for external verification of submitted provisional marks. More guidance, centre guide, including visual graphic with timelines, will be published on Skills for Wales by April 2022. Provisional marks back to learners from the centres, assessors within 1 week again. Once results are submitted to the awarding organisation, maximum of 8 weeks before grades confirmed for you and your learners. More guidance to follow, retimings. That is within the Qualification Wales Centre admin guide. Details are in there about that. But you may have learners finishing at different times. You may have a cohort of learners finishing at the same time. Again, you may have learners that have been off sick and maybe finishing after majority of other learners have finished. So, you know, it's all about the planning and availability of your staff, etc. And then feeding that into the AO for external quality assurance. Further webinars will follow the internal external verification process and expected dates to be confirmed later. Candidates can appeal against assessment decisions. In the first instance, they need to submit an appeal to the college or centre. Should they be unhappy with the outcome, they can escalate the appeal to the awarding body, EAL, and that's the address there, link to the EAL appeals policy, or it's downloadable from Smarter Touch by the centre. This link will take centres to the appeals policy, which outlines how to apply, and if there are any costs, documentation are also available on Smarter Touch, which I've just mentioned, repeated myself. Should the candidate be unsatisfied with the EAL's decision about the appeal, they can escalate to Qualification Wales. So they're the processes for appeals against an assessment decision. So resources then. So delivery guides are available on Skills for Wales under Tutor Resources.
Mark, can I just jump in? We've had a question.
Yeah.
We've had a question with regard to APL of previous qualifications undertaken. So I'll read it to you. It says, is there any of the content from within the Foundation Level 2 qualification that may have been completed before doing the Progression Level 2, which can be used at APL to reduce the amount of work needed to be done, particularly the practical work?
There's an RPL or an APL document being created by EAL product team, which I think I don't know if it's been uploaded yet onto the Skills for Wales website, but I know it's not far off being completed if it hasn't already.
It doesn't appear to be on there at the moment, Mark.
No, but that is in progress and being developed at the moment, because we've had similar questions in relation to level 2 progression onto level 3. You know, current level 2 learners and current level 3 learners, can their quals that they've gained already be RPL'd into this new suite of qualifications?
Yeah. And the follow-up question to that, Mark, is does the foundation need to be completed before the progression, or is it a standalone qualification?
Sorry, what was that? Does the foundation qualification?
So does the foundation qualification need to be completed before the progression, or is the progression a standalone qualification?
It's a standalone qualification.
Hope that's answered both, Nigel.
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the delivery guides available on the Skills for Wales website. Relevant legislation, regulations, documents and guidance are on there. Safe systems of work procedures, appropriate practical advice, any specialist equipment required in their applications, good methods and techniques to be used are on there, and that's the link to the Skills for Wales website. Progression, there's some zip files there to download for documents for teaching and learning that are in there, which may be useful. Okay, so moving on to guided discussion now. Guided discussion, as the word implies, it's guided. So you can support and plan and prepare the learner for the guided discussion. And the sort of following slides will take us through the preparation for learners to be able to take the guided discussion. So the purpose of the guided discussion is to confirm the learner's ability to review and reflect on the tasks that they have undertaken, and for them to demonstrate what they have learned from these tasks. Learners' knowledge and understanding how they will work in the construction sector, considering the work that they have done and the things they will need to consider as they move forward in their career. The learner's knowledge and understanding of how to manage their own welfare, health and well-being whilst working in the construction sector. And learners' projects evidence to be made available by the college assessors prior to the guided discussion. Following the completion of the practical project, learners will be required to complete the guided discussion, 40 minutes, one-time session, so it can't be broken. It must be continuous time guided discussion session, with an extra 5 minutes can be added to allow the learner to complete the final answer. The guided discussion is graded standalone and not linked to the practical project performance. So there's two key areas of exploration in the guided discussion. Learners' evaluations and reflections on their practical project, and readiness for work in the employability skills in the construction industry. So they will consider the tasks carried out, their effectiveness while planning and preparing to carry out the tasks in their trade area, work performance in carrying out the tasks in their trade area in respect of the set requirements and own success criteria, reflect on their strengths and greatest levels of challenge. Based on their reflections, demonstrate the ways that they would approach further and different work tasks across the construction industry. So the readiness for work and employability skills in the construction industry, to consider the learner's readiness for working and employability skills in the construction industry, consideration of mental and physical well-being in the industry. The guided discussion will focus on employment considerations and opportunities when working in the construction industry, employability skills that will need to be demonstrated when working in the trade, what approaches the learner will use to manage their own welfare and health and well-being in the construction sector. So these are all the key areas of the exploration of the guided discussion. So guided discussion then. The discussion discovers two content areas as shown below. It's just, one discussion area 1, planning and evaluation. So that's the sort of areas that there need to be evidence on the unit referencing. So the importance of effective and appropriate communication with others, the importance of emotional intelligence and effective communication, how to plan time, how to set targets and success criteria, importance of reflective practice. So I've done the job, but what could I have done it better? And there's the other parts of that that brief and section there. And the second one is the discussion area of self-employment, the trade bodies and organisations relevant to the trade, the role of the trade bodies and organisations, characteristics of self-employment, advantage or disadvantage of employment, response of being self-employed, patterns in employment and rises and falls in demand, and the duty of care, ensuring products and work are safe for end users. So that's the second part of the guided discussion. So the qualification grading, overall, this qualification is graded pass, merit and distinction. If a learner fails, they will not receive a certificate. Details of how these grades can be achieved are calculated can be found in the assessment pack. So all that detail is within the assessment pack, which is quite a lengthy document, which I'm sure some of you have probably already downloaded. The qualification manual and the assessment packs, etc. There's some hefty reading in there, and it's worth having good team meetings, standardisation meetings, Q&A across assessors, IQAs, etc. in preparation for this qualification. And obviously, once the qualification's started and implemented, having regular meetings, discussing how things are going, across your teams of tutors, assessors and quality assurance staff. So things you may want to consider so far. What CPD needs to have you identified for yourself in delivering the qualification and assessment and internal quality assurance requirements? Bearing in mind that the assessments are different to what you're probably used to. It's about getting to how you're going to prepare for those, how you're going to prepare learners for the assessments, how many practice sessions are you going to do with them, how are you going to teach them about the reporting and verbs and phrases to be used. All that sort of thing comes in developing your lesson plans and preparation. And then quality assurance of that, standardization of your assessments need to be built on and discussed between IQAs and your assessors. How you design your qualification delivery to include mock assessments, including practice for the grade guided discussion. So again, set them a task for the guided discussion, let them prepare, feedback on the preparation, let them be assessed, feedback on the outcomes, and then give them another go. Pointing out areas of improvement, what things to consider, so they can see there's the development for themselves before you obviously learner embarks on the actual guided discussion itself. All this, if they're moving on to level 3, is great practice for the level 3 professional discussion, which will be done externally rather than in centre. What teaching and learning resources have you designed to support the guided discussion? An example video or audio example of good and bad practice. So you might want to, carry out the assessors between themselves, your teaching staff doing a good and bad practice session, and showing it to learners to show them good and bad practice, and then letting them develop their own sort of reading and resources to prepare themselves for the session. Have you designed your own bank of guided discussion in addition? Sorry, have you designed your own question bank for guided discussion in addition to resources provided by City and Guilds and EAL that you can use as mock assessments? So again, in the guided discussion, you might be asking questions to bring out more information out of the learner. And again, as you move into, if learners move into the level 3, part of the professional discussion is looking at the practical project, and the professional discussion is identifying any weaker areas in the practical project and questions being asked by the external assessor to make sure that the learner is competent and capable of the areas that they've identified is weak or scored low on in the practical project. So again, it's preparing them all for the similar process, really. Remember that questions asked must not lead the learner. Build questions around marking grid descriptors, which are in the assessment packs. Again, yeah, you must not lead the learner. You can ask several questions around the subject, and eventually the penny may drop if you're struggling to get the type of answer back from the learner. But it's about practicing on this questioning technique.
Couple of questions, Mark, before we move on.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so question from Martin. Martin's asked, what is meant by the 40 hours for practical assessment can't be broken? What is meant by that?
That means you might start the assessment on a Monday and continue it through to Friday, through normal working days, and then it may be finished off the following Monday. But what can't happen is you're doing it every Monday for 4 hours, to get the 40 hours in over 10 weeks.
So Martin's point really was it's not for a full time. So it's definitely not full time. It's designed around apprenticeship and on site 40 hours. Is that right?
Yeah, well, the 40-hour assessment, that's the length of the assessment. College working week, you probably won't get 40 hours in that week. It may have to go into a second week, but it's got to be a continuous assessment.
Hope that's answered your question, Martin. The other question came through from Franco. What parts of the foundation course overlap with the new qualification? If progression is standalone, will a progression student have to go back and complete the foundation elements if they get an apprenticeship? So I'll reread that, Mark.
Yeah.
What parts of the foundation course overlap with the new qualification?
Yeah.
If the progression... Go on.
Good question, that. In the foundation qualification, the learner must do 2 trades. So I don't know, let's say they've either picked, they might have picked carpentry and electrical, or plastering and plumbing, or they might have picked electrical and plumbing. So when they come on to the level 2 progression, some of that learning may be mappable over, but they won't have done the full cohort of learning on the foundation qualification for the progression qual.
Okay, so if that being the case, with the progression being standalone, will somebody who's a progression student have to go back and complete the foundation elements if they then get an apprenticeship? So if they move from being a full-time progression student into an apprenticeship, would they have to start all over again?
From progression
into an apprenticeship.
Into an apprenticeship. Well, the apprenticeship qual is a level 3, so the different assessments.
So you could only APL stuff that you've done at level 2 then.
Yeah, well, again, the APL documentation, it's not been published yet, I don't think. So we'll have to wait and see what comes out of that, to see what can be APL'd and what can't be. And whether it can or can't be from this suite of qualifications. I know the question originally was asked for qualifications, current qualifications, level 2s and level 3 qualification, can they be RPL'd into the new qualification Wales qual? So I think that's what they've been working on, but they will have been working on majority of different routes of APL. But it's something we'd have to ask product on that for an answer of when that's going to be available.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, Frank, I hope that's sort of giving you some guidance. That's it for the moment, Mark. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Preparation and planning for and of the guided discussion, yours and the learners. So again, it's about preparing yourselves. What learner preparation needs to be planned. Formative practice with self and learners before summative assessment. So again, training across assessors, standardization, discussions between yourselves on what you're going to do, what the plan is to develop the learners to be able to take the summative assessment, the actual assessment. Formative preparation, recording, use of audio technology, use this for learners' reflection. So if you're doing guided discussions, you might want to record it and then play it back to the learner. Managing individual timescales and design all questions, stroke follow-up questions. Some will be unique to that learner. Some may be, standard, but try and have some follow-up questions if learners are not answering how they should be or expected to. But as we said earlier on, don't be leading the learners. There need to be open questions really to get the learner to expand and feed the correct answer in. Final assessment, grading of the learner's evidence. Again, timescales and planning. Have a look at practical assessments. Have a look at a professional discussion. Discuss it between you. How long do we think it's going to take to do this? I know one centre that we've had assessors carrying out the practical assessments to see how long it took them to carry out the practical assessments, and then maybe adding a bit more time on for learners to carry that out that are not as au fait with the industry as the assessors are. So again, it's building all that information, getting all that information together to get your planning accurate.
Sorry, Mark,
Yeah.
we've just had a query about the apprenticeships as such. If you do progression, you still have to complete 6 core units, correct? From the foundation qual. Is this also the case for an apprentice?
Well, the level 3 is the qualification. The apprenticeship is not created yet. It's still in development as far as I'm aware.
So it's basically Martin is suggesting that progression isn't standalone, but he's saying if you do progression, you still have to complete 6 core units from the foundation qualification. Is this also the case for an apprentice? But what we're saying is the progression qualification is separate from the apprenticeship, correct?
Yeah, well, the foundation, the progression, and the level 3 are all separate qualifications. They do have interaction between them, though.
Has that helped, Martin? If you've got anything else,
on the qualification Wales website for the links between the quals, it identifies it in there.
Thanks, Mark.
Internal external verification of assessment. How will this be planned? With who and when? Centre admin guide is available. It's available now. It's been published back in March, so that's on the Skills for Wales website. Feedback to the learners through the outcomes of their assessments, always provisional and subject to external verification. So again, As you can see from the grading of the practical assessments, there's 3 different grades for distinction, 2 for merit, 2 for pass, and then you've got the fail. So again, it's making sure that all those are accurate and that the grade awarded is accurate. And then obviously we've got the guided discussion post that. Planning and practice for the guided discussion. All learners must understand the assessment components for the qualification. And how's this checked? Or how are you going to check that? Get them to design questions based on this that they would ask during a guided discussion. There'll be 15 questions in addition to those provided by City and Guilds and EAL. Must be based on the grading criteria though. Questions will need to cover the unit and trade requirements. This would then make them familiar with the topic areas. Get them to compile some of the questions themselves on paper and share with peers. Get them to produce an exemplar back of questions that could be used for formative assessment. Get them to role play together and the questions and answers in pairs or groups with observers feeding back. How confident are your learners in verbally answering set questions? Are they listening to what is being asked? Can they give clear and concise answers with examples? The more practice you provide, the more confident they should become in the process and the requirements. So again, it's about practicing, asking the questions. You may have some shy people, and again, you may have learners that are not English speaking, but English is the second language. So again, they may not understand the question, so they may have to be repeated questions to allow them to understand. Have you identified the recording technology device? Sorry, have you identified the recording technology stroke device, not visual, that will be used for the guided discussion? Or will this need to be purchased, captured, stored, GDPR, etc.? So yeah, for the guided discussion, you will need to record that and be securely saved somewhere on a system, so it can be replayed for sampling, IQA sampling and EQA checking as well. But it cannot be video, it can only be audio recorded. So it's what device are you going to use to record that? And how are you going to save the files? Does any existing technology work? You may have had something used for guided discussions that you might have used on a verbal recording, which might still be of use for this. So, and how familiar are with it in operating this? Maybe worth having a practice doing the sort of guided discussion, professional discussions, etc. Similar to professional discussions. What is the quality of recording like? Can you hear them clearly? Room setup, is any background noise? Which obviously the guided discussion needs to be on a one-to-one basis in a closed room, so there's no background noises available. Most learners enjoy technology, mobile phones that can record. How might you build in the use of their own technology into their practice of their guided discussion? For example, self-recording and reflection. peer group discussions with reflection, tutor reflections, etc. Mock recordings of discussions use people the learners may not know to ask questions and change environment. They may well get used to other styles or your style. Will it be you that conducts the guided discussion of someone in the trade area that the learner is less familiar with? Have you factored this into the planning? So again, all these things need to be sort of considered. So these are just tips and guidance points for you to consider on reflection of these slides. So time management for the guided discussion is 40 minutes. You can have an extra 5 minutes to answer the last question if required. So again, 10 to 15 questions externally set. Can you back these up with further questions to generate more evidence for the learner? Answers will naturally be contextualized by the learner. Preparation is key to success by you and your learners. What answers are you expecting in line with the assessment criteria for this component of the assessment? Backup questions if you need more. Have you planned for these? Are these available? Now, what I would suggest as well is don't just have 10 to 15 questions and ask the same questions across all your learners. There need to be a range of differences. So they'll be externally set, but if you're setting further ones, then obviously make sure there's a mixture of questions in there to pick from. Use of the language in the mock questions that you may prepare. Are they at the right level for the learner? What will you do if you complete in 25 minutes? What time have you set aside to re-listen to the learner recording and assess this? So that's important. Obviously, you've got the questions you're asking to the learner and recording that. And then what you've got to do, you've got to assess the learner recordings to make a judgment then. How will your assessment outcome for the guided discussion be internally verified? So again, question for the internal verifiers, internal quality assurance staff is, are you going to observe? Are you going to listen to the guided discussions and evaluate the questions being asked? Are they leading? Are they closed questions? Are they using enough open questions so the learner can reflect and make an informed answer? So all these sort of things need to be considered. So another point is the learner's language, behaviours and questions for the guided discussion. Could be, what can I wear? What do I bring in? Notes, etc. What if I don't understand the question being asked? So all these questions might be things that the learner's going to be asking. And for you to consider in the responses back to the learner. So here's some sort of potential answers you could give them. So what can I wear? Again, they need to be dressed presentable. Items that they can bring in. into the assessment, into the discussion to reflect back on. Might want to show you an area and then sort of read off the page. Let's say, you know, I did this evaluation of a costing of a project, and this is what I found. So he's also showing you as well as verbally explaining it, or she is verbally explaining it. So there's quite a few different responses there that could be given. So that's just some examples there. You can add to these, but just things for you to think about in your answers to learners' questions and queries. So again, assessors must use the whole assessment process in the guided discussion, plan, assess, feedback, and record. The assessor will outline the assessment specification with the learner, which includes a focus on the guided discussion, which knowledge, skills, and understanding will be covered, core content assessment criteria, the date and time of the guided discussion, who will be present, any supplementary evidence to be presented and discussed, consider the activity planner provided. And again, there's a link to that there in the Skills for Wales website resources. The assessor will complete the guided discussion with the learner, record the guided discussion, and later review the evidence and make an assessment decision based on the outcomes of the discussion against assessment criteria. The assessor then has to feedback and communicate their provisional assessment decisions, marks awarded to the learner, which is subject to external verification. The assessor will record the assessment marks on the required assessment records for each of the learners, and that will be saved by the centre. So the assessment specifications for the guided discussion are in the assessment pack, and as you can see there, there's an example taken out of one of the sections for the core content, planning and evaluation to base the questions on. So this section in the assessment pack, assessors must know and understand the guided discussion marking grid from the outset to ensure their questions allow the learner to evidence their best answers. Don't forget the marking grid should have been shared with and explained to the learners before their assessments, so they understand how to get the higher marks. To pass the guided discussion, learners must achieve at least 1 mark in each element of the discussion. Again, they've got the command verbs, what the learner needs to understand and include. Are the learners clear on the meaning of these so they can align their responses to the questions being asked? So these are the verbs in the guided discussion. Evaluate your own evaluation against standards. Again, how we had it before in the practical project, understanding the details of those wording listed there. Guided discussion, review and reflect on own reflection, make connections between skills, knowledge and understanding. Get learners to do an activity about what they think these words mean and how they apply to their required assessment briefs. So again, something to think about, maybe planning a little project activity, maybe in pairs with learners. So assessment specification for the guided discussion. So the parameters during the guided discussion, ideally, first address points where the learner is likely to be confident in answering before moving to any more challenging areas. This will give a progressive approach and assist in assigning a mark and gauging the learner's ability. So ease them into the questioning. Use open questions with why, what, how, where and when to provide opportunities for learners to demonstrate their attainment and understanding. Use any follow-up questions, giving the learner the opportunity to explore the discussion point fully. The questions should be thoughtful, relevant and pitched at the appropriate level. Discuss the learner's projects with them, looking for evidence of specific knowledge, procedures and processes and decision making together with their skills. Questioning should provide a gradual handling over the learner. You would expect the learner to be taking the lead in the discussion at the initial opening questions brief. After the initial opening questions brief. So ease them in, get them to pick up the confidence and take over the discussion. Identify topic areas and responses which can be further explored later in the discussion. So is there anything you might want to further question on, then just make a note of that and then ask them further into the discussion once they've got a bit of confidence. So marking and grading. Again, all this is in the assessment pack, in the marking grid in there. So as you can see, again, you've got fail, pass 1, pass 2, merit 1, merit 2, distinction 1, 2 and 3, and the relevant marks that link to those gradings. So again, in your sort of left-hand side there, they're the sort of areas or depth of knowledge to consider to allow 1 mark, 2 marks and 3 marks. And then in the self-employment bit, similar thing there, 1 mark, 2 mark, 3 marks, etc. There's a note there at the bottom, 3 marks must come from the planning and evaluation descriptors and 1 mark must come from the self-employment descriptors. So there's a key thing to consider there when you're doing the marking and evaluation of the grading. So marking grid, marking descriptors. So identifies there what are the basic requirements, the considered level, and then you've got the more sort of intermediate level for the marks, grades 1 and 2. That's in the planning and evaluation section. And then it's got down here on the left-hand side is the key words used in the marking grid, which you will be assessing against to include in the learner's feedback. So brief reflection. So they've got to be including some of these key words in their answers when they're feeding back to you. You know, if they're using, you know, some of these words and some of the other words, you're going to make a decision on the level that where they sit. So it's about, you know, getting them to consider the types of wording they use in their answers, and again, that's through practice in the guided discussion within your sessions. Any further questions, Graham?
No more have come through. So what I would say to anybody, if you get anything else after that you've had to think about today, and maybe you want to re-watch the whole thing, and you've got anything else that comes up, then please feel free to to email us and ask us, and we can go in a little bit more depth. But no, we really appreciate your coming on board today. Thank you for your questions. And as I say, if you've got any further questions, please email us. Okay. Thanks, Mark.
Okay. There's also the survey to complete. That'll be sent out with the presentation. I don't know if you've uploaded that in the chat section, Graham.
No, I haven't. I think it goes out automatically, Mark, doesn't it?
All right. Okay.
If not, then I'll deal with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can do both. It doesn't matter. We'll go out with the slides, but it can also go in the slide deck anyway.
Okay.
In that section.
Yeah.
So if anybody's got any questions, then please, if any further questions, then please contact skillsforwales.customer@ael.org.uk or use the Welsh link there if you want to do that in Welsh. That both the slide pack is available in English and in Welsh, so that will be sent to you via the team that are involved in the GoToWebinars, so that will come out to you. And that, obviously, as I mentioned, the webinar survey will come out to you as well. And as Graham said, if you've got any queries or questions, please send us an email and ask us. If you want us to feedback on any specific thing, if you can provide your email address so you can contact you directly, that'll be great. Obviously, we protect it under GDPR. We'd be just responding to you on any particular emails that come in. That's it. End of the presentation. Thanks for your attending the session today. Much appreciated. Hope you've got something from that. As Graham said, if you've got any questions, then please let us know or put them in the Skills for Wales link to the EAL questions email address, and we'll answer them once we get that information sent to us. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much.